Okay, welcome to the floor. This is a rifle. It is not taped. This is a new rifle that I am taping. So what you need to retape a rifle or tape a rifle is a screwdriver to take this bit off and the strap off. You need strapping tape. I would use the tape that runs with fiberglass lines down the middle. It looks like this. And white and some black electric tape. You don't need a lot of black. And I would use scissors, especially for the strapping tape. So to start off, we are just going to take our screwdriver and unscrew these metal bits. This is called the swivel, or I'm pretty sure it's just called the swivel. Okay, so when you're dealing with screws, I would recommend having them in a spot where you know where they are. I'm just going to use the container of this tape as that spot, just so that they don't run around and I don't lose them. Now we're going to do, this is called the bolt. We're going to take this part off. Okay, now that we have our screws off, I'm just going to set this aside. And now we have our naked rifle. You notice the pads here? This is where we're going to put strapping tape over. So this is a little thick. Most of the time you're not going to get a perfectly nice and thin bit of strapping tape. So what we're going to do is we are going to take this off. So we have our roll of strapping tape. It's very thick. You notice that I'm not going to be able to get this on here. So what I like to do is I'm going to take my scissors and cut this about a 30-70 split. That's more like 60-40, but it's okay. I'm just going to take that, and now we have two strands of strapping tape. We have our little bit thicker and we have our thinner strand. So what this is going to be for, I'm going to use the thinner strand for the more curvy bits like the neck here and some of the butt. And I'm going to use the thicker end for like this bit and the straight part of the neck. So for the tip, you can really use either. I like to use that bit. So for this, I'm going to take a length, probably just 2 finger lengths from the end here. And then I'm going to really pull this tight to get across, and then another 2 finger lengths here, and I'm going to cut this. Okay, so there is our first little bit on the tip. So if you see closely, you can see that the padding is going to be pulled down by the tape. We want to make sure that's really, really tight so that it doesn't become very clunky when you're spinning it. You really want to have a nice and smooth pad at the end. So I'm going to take another 2 finger lengths. I'm going to pull this tight, perpendicular to where I had my first bit. Boom. Pull this tight down. Okay, now I have a plus with the strapping tape. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thin strapping tape, my thin bit here. If you have a 1 inch thick, 1.5 inch thick roll of strapping tape, you can just use the one. You don't have to split that down, but it's just convenient if you have a thicker roll. So I'm going to take my thin, I'm going to go across, and I'm going to want to make a star pattern, a star shape with my strapping tape. That is going to make the best coverage when I am taping. There. And then I'm going to take another little piece, go 2 finger lengths. I'm going to cross that right about there. Now what I'm going to do, this isn't perfectly down, so I'm just going to take my palm, and I'm just going to roll that out a little bit. Now that's a bit smoother. Okay, so some of our tip done. Now we're going to take our thicker strapping tape, and we are going to go 3 finger lengths worth of a bit of a spiral. So I'm going to get this at a bit, not perfectly parallel, but a little bit more to the angle of it. And then I'm just gonna go around once, snip that, and then I'm gonna go around, make that bit of a steeper angle. There, I'm gonna go around, and there. Snip. Okay, now check, that is about 3, that'll be good. If you notice that your tape is creasing, I would just try going over it again. I would go back and do it again. Or you can really just kind of squeeze them out if you really have to. So we have our tip done. Now we're going to move on to this bit here. I do not remember what it is specifically called, but we're going to use our thicker tape. And then we're going to go at the bottom. Usually you're going to want to start at the bottom. I'm going to go about parallel with the angle of the rifle. And then I'm going to do once around. Now you'll notice that's not quite lining up perfectly. So I'm going to take this bit, which I already have, snip that. And I'm going to go back. And I'm going to try to get this a bit more towards the tip with the angle. Just a hair. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to taping. There and there. Okay. There is the first layer of our doodle bit. And then we're going to do that once more to get extra protection in this area. This is a very prone area for breakage, so make sure you get it right. Snip. Okay. So there is our doodle a bit done. I'm going to go 3 finger lengths for the neck, for this bit of the neck here. So I'm going to take my thicker strapping tape. So I have the length that I need. So I'm just going to go at the top, align it good, and then come down and meet the strands at the bottom. Right there. Boom, perfect. And then I'm gonna do that again. A way you can save a little bit of time is just going on the not sticky side, just putting it at a point, wrapping it around. That's to see how much length you need. So I have my bit. I'm going to go a little bit more than that so I have a nice good overlap, and I'm going to snip it. Okay, now I'm going to go at the middle. I'm going to plop it down gently and then meet them there. Ooh, that's a bad crease. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, so there we have our 3 finger lengths there. Good. And then we're going to move on to this bit. We're going to take our thick strapping tape. And we're gonna skip this curvy bit for now, right there. And we're just gonna start here. Going around. This is probably the easiest part of taping it. I'm going to get that a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead for this. It's pretty straightforward. You just wrap it around. Okay, so we did this little straight bit. Next part is the hardest part of the entire rifle, is this neck. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my thin tape, and I'm going to I'm going to do a wrap around with the non-sticky side. See how much I need? About that much. Okay, and then I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to meet them at the bottom. And there we go. That is our first one. For more precision, you can even cut this thin bit into halves, which I am going to do, actually. I'm going to do that. That is going to help reduce the amount of creases you get by a lot. So I'm just going to put that there. Okay. Bring this around, do my little loop-de-loop. Take that about that much right there. Okay, and then I am going to start at the bottom, or start at the top, meet them at the middle, and boom, boom, boom. After a few ones, you get used to how much length you need, but you can still use the non-sticky side as a guide. Now the reason I'm doing it like this and not just wrapping it around with one continuous strand is because of the creasing and because I want this rifle to last. It is not my rifle that I'm taping it for someone, so I do not want to be the one responsible for its breaking. And if you tape it badly, you are going to waste $60. Let me actually make sure this is a frame. That should be good. Okay, so yeah, don't waste your money just to break a rifle. That is embarrassing for you. I feel embarrassed. I feel the pain in my soul just by thinking about it. Okay, for a guide, put your thumb like you're going to do a drop spin, and then press your thumb against a gun, just like that. I'm gonna go to about here. If you want more protection, you can go press your thumb like that and go to here. Okay, that should be about good. So here's our almost finished neck. We're missing one part, which is this one. So I'm going to take my thinner tape and just do a loop around my length of strapping tape. And I'm going to start with a little bit hanging over. That way it will work. Okay, so I'm going to take that. I'm going to go around. Make sure that's clean. So I'm going to go around, and then I'm going to go boom. And then I'm going to just press this down. You don't need to cut it unless you have a lot of extra over. And then I'm going to take another bit of longer tape that is curvy. So I'm going to go just like that. And boom shakalaka. You have middle part done. Next is the bolt. I mean the butt. This is the most, probably second most important part to tape. Well, because that's where you're going to be tossing from for real. So I'm going to take my thicker strapping tape, and I'm going to start at the middle of the bolt of the butt. And I'm going to take just like 2 finger lengths here, and then I'm going to press against the pad like this. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to press, pulling the pad down, making it really tight and smooth, like such. And there we go. That is number 1. I will cut to the finished one. Okay, so I have 3, and then for these corner bits, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thicker strapping tape, and I'm going to just lay it on the corner. Okay, so we're starting on the pad. We're going to squeeze it, push it down, and then I'm going to take where this bends, and I'm going to cut it. Right there and right there. And then I'm going to pull this in, and then pull this in. Then we're going to fold this down, push that in, and push that in. Boom, shakalaka. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now I have the corners, and now I'm going to do just that little teensy bit of padding left on the butt. I'm going to use my thinner tape here so that I can get a bit more maneuverability. That's a big word. Okay, so now we're going to take our thicker strapping tape starting at just about the end of the bottom side. So what that means, where the bottom of the gun comes up, that little curve, we're going to put it just past that, and that's where we're going to start a roll. So we're going to do a roll, we're going to wrap, and we're going to go around, and then I'm going to cut it right about where that corner meets the flat part. That way it doesn't come at an angle, which is going to mess up the rest of the roll. And I'm going to do that again for about 3-4 finger lengths. Probably do 4 finger lengths. Okay, now that should be just about all of the strapping tape done for this rifle. Something I forgot to mention earlier is you want to mark your holes for your screws. So I'm just going to take my scissors, I'm going to do a little pokey there, and pokey here. There we go. Okay, and then you don't need to mark these because the bolt will self-align them. But that should be our strapping tape. I'm going to move on to electrical tape now. Okay, welcome to the strapping tape section. If you are just doing the electrical tape, then skip to this chapter. Okay, so we have our strapping tape done. What we're going to do now is we're going to start on the tip, and I'm going to do a star pattern. I'm going to take a strand of electrical tape. You don't need that much on the base, and I'm going to go across and snip it there, and then I'm going to go across diagonal on that. Okay, so we have our cross, and now I'm going to go down with a spiral pattern. Not pattern, just in a spiral. So I'm going to start at the top, just about where the flat part begins and the pad ends. So I'm going to do a loop around, making sure not to stretch my tape, or else that'll make it easier to tear. And then I'm going to start going down. Make sure that there's going to be a little bump in the tape. I don't know if this camera will pick it up, but I'm going to put a picture here. And make sure that bump stays consistent throughout the spiral, or else it will look bad. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so we have our spiral, and then I'm going to do one last loop ending at the bottom. Snip. Okay, that's our tip done. Now we're going to do the dingle bulb. I actually still don't know what this is called. So I'm going to start at the bottom here, and I'm going to go around and around and around. Okay, now that I'm coming up on my hole, I'm going to make sure to mark it with my scissors. And then I'm going to do a little loop. And there we go. Ending wherever. I actually don't care. Okay, that's our tip and doogle bob. Next, we're going to start at the neck, starting at the bottom. I'm going to fast forward through here. It's pretty simple. Okay, now that I'm coming up on this drop, I'm going to do one loop around, just barely over the edge. I'm going to push this in, and then I'm going to do one more. Actually, yes. So I'm going to do one loop more over the edge, making sure that's not going to bend. And then I'm going to push that in, and then I can do my loop on the flat part. Okay, and then I can do my spiral around this area. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so now that we are coming up on the skinny part of the neck, we are going to do the exact same thing. You may notice that it'll get a bit, the slope of the spiral is going to become a lot less steep, and that's normal. As long as you're making progress in it, you don't want to get too feisty in the angle. Okay, so that is our middle bit done, plus the neck. Now we're going to do the butt. I'm going to start on the padding bit, going just a little bit there, and then not stretching, but just barely going over. And then I'm going to cut there. And then you're going to go out with the strands, not like just out from the center. There. And then there. And you're going to do that on both sides. Okay, so now that we have our outer bit done, we are going to do a diagonal on the ends. If you notice that the tape is not fully setting on the diagonal, what we're going to do is do another one of these on the top of the butt, I guess, and then that'll make it set more. Hope that makes sense. Okay, that is our butt done. Boom. So then we are going to do another spiral on the fat part of the butt. And then we're going to mark our hole again. And poke it right there. That's our holes. So that is most of the taping done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the strap and the bolt. Now the easiest way to do this I found is to just do the strap by itself. So what we're going to do, usually this is taped fine, this is tightened fine, and then you can adjust it if you need. But we're going to take probably not a bunch of black tape, but we're just going to take some strip black tape, start on the bottom here, over this little screw. And then we're going to do one wrap around, two wrap around, boom, boom, boom. You want to get this to make it so that the end here is laying flat against the strap. So what this is doing is making sure that the screw doesn't come undone, because if it does, then your rifle will not have a working strap. It'll fly around. So that's just another safety precaution. Doing the same thing on the other side. Okay, now we are ready to put this on. Now, I like to do it with the more holes facing the butt and the less holes facing the tip. To me, that just looks the best. I've seen people do it the other way, but you can do it however you want. But this is how I like to do it. So I'm gonna take my screw. I'm just gonna do a little test screw in with my hands, just to make sure it fits nicely. Okay, so I'm gonna align it I'm gonna align it with the hole, and then using my hand, I'm just gonna screw it in just a little bit to make sure it stays in place. And then I'm gonna take my screwdriver, screw it in. Make sure this swivel bit is aligned with the rest of the gun. Then we're going to do the same thing with the other side. Okay, that is our strap done. Now we're going to screw in the bolt. You don't need to align this, just make sure it's pressed nicely against it or else it won't go in. And then just screw it in. And that is the basics done. This is, if your guard just does bare minimum, this is what you would want to see. But there are some little bits and doodads I'm going to do to make sure this rifle spins the nicest and feels the nicest. So I'm going to take just a little bit of strapping, just a little bit of black tape, probably like 2 fingers worth, not even, like 2 inches. I'm going to take that and I'm just going to put it over these screws. That's going to make it look nicer. Just a little bit. Boom. Boom. And boom. And boom. Okay, that is first thing you can do. Second thing you can do, take some white tape and look at where the screw is hitting the wood of your strap, and then cover that wood with tape. This is going to make sure that the black doesn't scrape off on the wood and make it dirty and eventually chip off the paint. So that's just gonna help increase the longevity of your rifle. The way I do it, cut it like a rectangle, and then cut it, and then put it on lengthwise to get a nice little pad, because it's not gonna always hit in that same spot. It's gonna move around a little bit, front and back. Next thing is to take your white tape, and this is for your safety and so that you don't cut yourself. You're gonna wrap this around, you're gonna wrap the tape around the swivel. So I'm gonna do a little bit there, covering that, and I'm gonna do a loop around up until the actual metal part that is touching the strap. Then I'm going to use my thumb, press down on the strap, and I'm going to keep looping this around until I get to about a finger length onto the strap. This is just making sure that you don't cut yourself or hit your hand on anything that is going to cut you or hurt you. There we go. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the butt side. This is going to be use a bit more tape. Another thing you can do to make sure this stays in place is put strapping tape down over the swivel, but I have never done that personally. Okay, so this should be your finished rifle. Look how pretty it is. I hope yours looks just like it. But that is going to do it. Yeah, just make sure to be patient. Make sure your spirals are consistent, and that will be about it. Bye.